Hold up your hand. Look at your index finger, the one you point with. Now look at your ring finger, the fourth one from your thumb. If your index finger is longer than your ring finger, or if they are roughly equal, you belong to a group that the internet has largely ignored. Every viral video about finger length celebrates the long ring finger, the athlete's hand, the risk-taker's hand, the testosterone marker. The entire conversation about digit ratio has been dominated by one side of the story, the people whose ring fingers are longer. This video is for the other side. If your index finger is longer, you carry a biological marker that is associated with higher verbal intelligence, stronger empathy, greater emotional sensitivity, and according to a study of over 1,500 men published in the British Journal of Cancer, a 33% lower risk of prostate cancer. A separate 2026 study connected your finger ratio to the evolutionary process that expanded the human brain to its current size. The long ring finger gets the attention. The long index finger may have gotten the better deal. Your finger ratio was set between weeks 8 and 14 of your development in the womb. It records a hormonal event that shaped your brain, your behavior, and possibly your health. And if your index finger is longer, what that event produced is not the testosterone-driven profile that gets all the headlines. It is something quieter, something the research says may be more connected to the specific trait that makes humans human. Subscribe, because the other finger finally gets its video. Between weeks 8 and 14 of fetal development, the growing fetus is bathed in a mixture of hormones, testosterone and estrogen. The ratio between these two hormones during that specific window determines the relative length of the index and ring fingers for life. Higher testosterone produces a longer ring finger. Higher relative estrogen produces a longer index finger, or fingers that are roughly equal in length. The scientific shorthand for this is the 2D-4D ratio. 2D means the second digit. The index finger, 4D means the fourth digit, the ring finger. If your index is longer, your ratio is above 1.0. If your ring finger is longer, your ratio is below 1.0. The average male ratio is roughly 0.95. The average female ratio is roughly 1.00. A longer index finger, a ratio at or above 1.0, indicates that during those critical 6 weeks in the womb, the hormonal balance tilted toward estrogen rather than testosterone. This does not mean you have low testosterone as an adult. Adult hormone levels are independent of prenatal exposure. What it means is that the hormonal environment during the specific window when your brain was being organized and your fingers were being formed favored estrogen. That prenatal estrogen did not just shape your fingers. It shaped the neural architecture of your developing brain simultaneously. The same hormones that made your index finger grow longer than your ring finger were, at the same moment, building neural connections that would influence your cognition, your emotional processing, and your social behavior for the rest of your life. The ring finger video told half the story, the testosterone half, the athlete, the risk-taker, the Neanderthal connection. This is the other half, the estrogen half, the communicator, the empath, and possibly the more evolved half of the human species. That last claim is not clickbait. It is the conclusion of a 2026 peer-reviewed study, and it is the reason this video exists. The research on higher 2D-4D ratios, the long index finger profile, has been accumulating for over 2 decades. The effects are small at the individual level, but consistent across studies and populations. Verbal ability. Higher ratios are consistently associated with stronger verbal fluency, vocabulary, and linguistic processing. A study presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference found that women with longer index fingers scored higher on cognitive tests at younger ages, specifically in verbal domains. The prenatal estrogen that shaped the finger also shaped the language centers of the brain, empathy, and social cognition. Higher ratios are associated with greater emotional sensitivity, stronger ability to read facial expressions, and higher scores on empathy assessments. The connection is not about personality, it is about neural architecture. The regions of the brain involved in processing others' emotions show different activation patterns in individuals with higher versus lower digit ratios, cooperative behavior. Research published in NeuroLaunch in 2026 summarized the pattern across multiple studies. Higher ratios are linked to tendencies toward more cooperative social behavior, lower physical aggression, and a reduced appetite for high-risk situations. The profile is not passive, it is strategic. Lower aggression and higher cooperation are, in many social environments, more effective strategies for achieving goals than dominance and risk. And then there is the health data. This is the part that most finger ratio videos never reach. A case control study of 1,524 prostate cancer cases and 3,044 controls, published in the British Journal of Cancer, found that men whose index finger was longer than their ring finger had a 33% lower risk of prostate cancer. In men under 60, the risk reduction was 87%, not a typo. 87%. The proposed mechanism is prenatal estrogen exposure. Higher estrogen during fetal development appears to provide a protective effect against the later development of prostate cancer, possibly by altering how the prostate gland responds to androgens throughout life. The finger is the marker. The protection is the consequence. If you have a longer index finger and you are a man, your finger ratio may be telling you something about your cancer risk that no other non-invasive marker can. A 33% reduction, visible on your hand, determined before you were born. Hit like and subscribe if you are learning something about your own body that you did not expect. The next chapter explains why evolution may have been selecting for your finger ratio all along. In February 2026, Professor John Manning at Swansea University published a study in the journal Early Human Development that connected digit ratio to the single most defining feature of human evolution, brain size. The study examined the relationship between 2D/4D ratios and neonatal head circumference, the standard proxy measurement for brain size at birth. The researchers found that in newborn boys, a higher 2D/4D ratio, a longer index finger, was associated with larger head circumference, higher prenatal estrogen, longer index finger, bigger brain. The implication is extraordinary. Human evolution is defined, more than any other trait, by the expansion of the brain. Over millions of years, the human brain tripled in size relative to our closest primate relatives. The evolutionary pressure that drove this expansion has been debated for decades. Diet, tool use, social complexity, language. Manning's research adds a hormonal mechanism. If higher prenatal estrogen produces larger brains, then the evolutionary trend toward larger human brains may have simultaneously been a trend toward higher prenatal estrogen levels, which means a trend toward higher 2D/4D ratios, which means a trend toward longer index fingers. The great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans have consistently lower 2D/4D ratios than modern humans. Their ring fingers are proportionally longer. Their prenatal environments are more testosterone dominated. Their brains are smaller. Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, also had lower 2D/4D ratios based on fossil hand evidence, longer ring fingers, more testosterone-dominated prenatal environments, smaller brains relative to their body size compared to modern Homo sapiens. Modern humans, with our enormous brains and our relatively equal or index-dominant finger ratios, may represent the current endpoint of an evolutionary trajectory that has been trading testosterone-driven traits for estrogen-driven traits for millions of years. If your index finger is longer than your ring finger, your digit ratio is more aligned with the direction that human evolution has been moving, not backward toward the apes, forward toward whatever humans are becoming. That is not a motivational statement. That is the mathematical implication of the data. The evolutionary trend line points toward higher ratios, bigger brains, more estrogen influence, longer index fingers. The long ring finger is the ancestral condition. The long index finger is the derived one. In evolutionary biology, derived means newer. It means the direction of change, and the direction of change in the human species measured in finger ratios across millions of years of fossil evidence is toward U. The 2018 Genome-Wide Association study of over 75,000 people identified 11 genetic loci associated with digit ratio variation. But 2 genes discovered in subsequent research tell the most specific story about why your index finger is the length it is. The first is SMOC1. A study conducted at Cambridge University found a variant in the SMOC1 gene, which is involved in early limb development, that directly influences which finger ends up longer. One form of the variant is associated with a longer ring finger. The other form is associated with a longer index finger. The gene acts during the same developmental window, weeks 8 to 14, when the prenatal hormones are shaping the digits. SMOC1 does not just build fingers. It is involved in craniofacial development, the construction of the skull and face. The same gene that helped determine whether your index finger would be longer than your ring finger also helped determine the shape of your face. Your finger ratio and your facial structure share genetic code. The second gene is LIN28B. This gene regulates the timing of puberty and overall growth tempo. Variants in LIN28B that are associated with later puberty are also associated with higher 2D/4D ratios. The genetic connection between finger ratio and developmental timing suggests that the prenatal hormonal environment that shapes your fingers also sets the clock for when your body matures. A longer index finger is genetically correlated with later puberty onset. Later puberty, in turn, is associated with longer growth periods, taller adult height, and in some studies, higher educational attainment. The chain from finger ratio to puberty timing to life outcomes is indirect but genetically documented. The heritability of digit ratio is estimated at 60 to 70%. Your finger ratio is primarily inherited, not randomly assigned. If your parent has a longer index finger, your probability of having one increases significantly. The specific combination of SMOG1, LIN28B, and the other 9 identified loci you carry was inherited from your parents, who inherited theirs from their parents, through a genetic lineage that stretches back through every ancestor who carried the estrogen-dominant prenatal profile. Your longer index finger is not a random variation. It is an inherited trait, coded across multiple genes, connected to brain development, puberty timing, facial structure, and cancer risk, passed down through a lineage of humans whose prenatal environments consistently favored the hormonal balance that produces a longer second digit. So hold up your hand one more time. If your index finger is longer than your ring finger, here is what the research says your hand is carrying: a prenatal hormonal signature tilted toward estrogen during weeks 8 to 14 of fetal development, a neural architecture that statistically favors verbal fluency, emotional sensitivity, and cooperative social behavior, a potential 33% reduction in prostate cancer risk if you are male, rising to 87% in men under 60. A digit ratio aligned with the evolutionary trend toward larger human brains, as documented in the 2026 Swansea University study. A genetic architecture involving SMOC1, LIN28B, and at least 9 other identified loci that also influence facial structure and puberty timing, and a profile that is more derived, more recent, and more aligned with the direction human evolution has been moving for millions of years. The internet celebrated the long ring finger, the athlete, the risk-taker, the testosterone marker. And those traits are real, the research supports them, but the internet ignored the long index finger, the communicator, the empath, the one with the cancer protection, the one whose prenatal profile is more aligned with the evolutionary expansion of the human brain. The ring finger gets the highlight reel, the index finger gets the health data, the brain study, and the evolutionary trajectory. Neither ratio is better in absolute terms. They are different expressions of the same prenatal window shaped by the same genes inherited through the same lineages. But if you have spent your life with a longer index finger and never once been told what it means, now you know. Your hand is not carrying the athlete's signature. It is carrying the communicator's signature, the empath's signature, and possibly the signature of the direction the human species has been evolving toward for the last several million years. The ring finger looks backward, toward the apes, toward the Neanderthals, toward the ancestral condition. The index finger looks forward, and forward is where you are standing. Higher verbal intelligence, stronger empathy, 33% lower prostate cancer risk, a brain-size connection documented in 2026, and an evolutionary trend line that has been moving toward your ratio for millions of years. The long index finger finally got its video. And the data says the quiet finger may have been carrying the better hand all along. Drop a comment. Is your index finger longer? Equal to your ring finger? And after watching both videos, the ring finger one and this one, which profile fits you better? Let us know. Subscribe for more. Share this with someone who needs to look at their hands. We will see you next time.